Garrick Voss, a sharp and resourceful human diplomat, had seen his fair share of high-stakes negotiations, but nothing had prepared him for this. The Zyrian Empire, an ancient, powerful alien civilization, had sent a fleet of ships to Earth. The Terran Alliance, in an effort to avoid war, chose Garrick to represent humanity in peace talks. With his quick wit and polished charm, he'd handled tricky situations before. But nothing could have prepared him for the moment when he stood before Queen Salzira, the terrifyingly beautiful and revered ruler of the Zyrians. She was taller than most humans, with skin that shimmered like polished obsidian and eyes that glowed with a faint blue light. Her long silver hair cascaded down her back like liquid moonlight. Every movement she made exuded power and grace, but there was a coldness in her gaze, a ruler's indifference to everything but the strength of her empire. She was everything Garrick had read about: majestic, intimidating, and utterly out of his league. The meeting was tense, filled with formalities and carefully calculated words. The Zyrians had a strict, almost ancient way of speaking, and the language barrier between their species and humanity was nothing short of challenging. But Garrick, ever the professional, had spent weeks learning basic Zyrian phrases. Still, nothing could prepare him for the fateful moment when the Queen's translator droid malfunctioned. The communication system buzzed, the words blurred, and in the silence that followed, Garrick did what seemed the most logical thing. He spoke from the heart. He had intended to make an elegant gesture of respect, offering his most formal human greeting, but a slip of the tongue caused disaster. What he thought was a diplomatic phrase translated, in Zyrian terms, as a traditional proposal of marriage. He hadn't realized it at first, but when the Queen's eyes widened and the court fell silent, Garrick felt the weight of the mistake. Before he could correct himself, Queen Salzira did something completely unexpected. She smiled. It wasn't a gentle smile. It was the smile of a ruler who had just won a great victory. A quiet murmur ran through the assembly, and then, to Garrick's shock, the Queen spoke the words that would change everything. "I accept your proposal, human." Garrick's heart skipped a beat. His mind raced as the court erupted in cheers. The alien ambassadors, some grinning, others trying to mask their shock, seemed to think it was all part of the plan. But Garrick, he had no idea what had just happened. He had never planned to propose, never dreamed that his diplomatic mission would end in such an absurd twist. The Queen's acceptance of his proposal made no sense, but it was clear that for the Zyrians, this was no simple misunderstanding. It was an event of cosmic importance. As he stood there, frozen in place, Garrick realized one thing. He had just accidentally proposed to the most powerful ruler in the galaxy, and somehow, against all logic, she had said yes. The room's attention shifted back to him as they awaited his response. Was this a joke, a mistake, or was this a game, one he wasn't prepared to play? Garrick Voss stood frozen, a cold sweat running down his back. The room was alive with excitement, but all he could hear was the pounding of his own heart. His mind was racing, trying to process what had just happened. How did this go so wrong? His diplomatic training had never prepared him for something like this. Queen Salzira had accepted his proposal, a mistake, an accident, and now he was stuck. The alien ambassadors in the room seemed to be exchanging knowing glances, whispering among themselves in their native tongue. Some were smiling, others trying to hide their expressions behind cold masks. But one thing was clear: they believed this was a moment of great importance, something that would change the course of their history. And then there was Queen Salzira herself. She stood there, regal and unshaken, her eyes locked on Garrick with a mix of curiosity and something else, something he couldn't quite place. "I accept your proposal, human," the Queen repeated, her voice calm yet commanding. Her words echoed in Garrick's mind, and for a moment he thought he might faint. Was she joking? It seemed impossible. The Zyrians had a long tradition of royal marriages and alliances, but how could she accept a proposal that had been made by pure accident? Garrick's mouth felt dry, his thoughts scattered. He knew one thing for sure. He had to figure out a way out of this situation. Fast. But what could he say? How could he explain to the Queen that this was all a mistake? He was a human diplomat, not a lover or some intergalactic suitor. He opened his mouth, but the words didn't come. The court, however, seemed to find it all very amusing. A wave of laughter spread throughout the room, some of it nervous, others genuine. The tension that had once hung over the gathering seemed to dissipate, replaced by a strange sense of excitement. It was as if they had all been waiting for something like this to happen, a dramatic moment that would bind their worlds together in a way no treaty ever could. Garrick's stomach twisted with unease. He tried to speak again, but once more, the words caught in his throat. Finally, he cleared his voice, gathering what little confidence he had left. "Your Majesty, I didn't mean. I didn't intend to propose. There's been a misunderstanding. I was just trying to show respect, not make any personal commitments." But the Queen raised a hand, silencing him instantly. Her gaze softened, and to Garrick's surprise, she smiled, not the cold, distant smile of a ruler, but something warmer, more genuine. "You misunderstand, human." She stepped forward, her voice lowering, now softer but still powerful. "I see what your kind can offer. The Xyrians have long been bound by duty, by tradition. But you, humans, you are not bound by these things. Your species is full of life, of unpredictability, of strength in the face of adversity. That is why I accept your proposal." Her words, though difficult to comprehend, held weight. Garrick blinked, trying to absorb her meaning. Was she saying that it wasn't just an accident, that there was something in him, or in humanity, that she admired? It was baffling, but there was no time for doubt. Queen Salzura's decree had been made, and her word was law. "You are to be my consort," she said firmly, the entire room nodding in agreement. "This is the future of the Xyrian Empire." Garrick's head spun. He was now a part of a royal bond he had never intended to form. He had come here to prevent war, not to become an intergalactic husband. Yet here he was, standing before the Queen of an empire, caught in a political whirlwind he never could have predicted. All he could do now was play along. But what was his next move? How could he turn this around? Or, more importantly, could he? Back on Earth, the news spread like wildfire. Within hours of Garrick's accidental proposal, the entire galaxy seemed to know about it. The Terran Alliance's media network was flooded with endless reports, interviews, and debates about the unintended union between humanity and the Xyrian Empire. To most, it seemed like a diplomatic miracle, a peace agreement with one of the most powerful alien civilizations in the universe, secured by a simple mistake. But to Garrick, it was a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. He sat in his lavish quarters within the Xyrian palace, staring at the holoscreens that displayed the chaos unfolding on Earth. The media had crowned him humanity's most eligible bachelor, and everywhere he looked, there were headlines about the intergalactic engagement of the century. He'd become an instant sensation. The Xyrians were fascinated with him. The humans were both horrified and curious, and he was stuck somewhere in between, wondering how on Earth, no, on Xyrian, he had gotten himself into this mess. The Xyrians, especially the palace court, seemed thrilled by the prospect of this union. Garrick had spent days in the palace, trying to stay ahead of the game. He met more ambassadors and royal officials than he could count, each one eager to talk about the marriage, as if it were the greatest diplomatic coup in the galaxy. But none of them seemed to notice how out of place he felt. The grandeur of the palace was overwhelming, with towering spires, crystal-clear lakes, and strange alien artifacts everywhere. He was just a human, a rather ordinary human at that. But Queen Salzura had her own plans. She had made it clear that she was not just accepting his proposal out of politeness, but because she saw something unique in humanity. She believed that the Xyrians, with all their power and tradition, had grown stagnant. They needed the bold, unpredictable nature of humans to truly evolve. Garrick, as bewildering as it seemed, was the key to her vision of a new empire. And so, she had ordered the entire court to treat him like a royal. Despite all this, Garrick couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It wasn't just the attention, the extravagant dinners, and the endless parades thrown in his honor. It was the constant pressure to perform, to become something he wasn't. Everywhere he went, there were eyes on him. Zarian noblewomen, tall, elegant, and silent, would watch him from across the room, their expressions unreadable. The male ambassadors would offer sly smiles and nods of approval, as if he were somehow a trophy they all wanted to claim. But it wasn't the attention that unnerved him. It was the fear that he might never be able to escape this tangled web of political games. And then there was General Scaris, a tall, battle-hardened Zarian who seemed to have little patience for humans. Scaris had been watching Garrick from the moment he arrived at the palace. His sharp eyes never missed a detail, and Garrick knew that Scaris didn't trust him. He wasn't just skeptical of humans. He was suspicious of Garrick specifically. He seemed to think that this whole marriage proposal was a clever ruse, a human plot to manipulate the queen and take control of the Zarian Empire. Scaris wasn't the only one who viewed Garrick as a potential threat. The Princess Valthera, Salzira's ambitious younger sister, saw the human as a pawn in a larger political game. She had long harbored her own aspirations to the throne, and Garrick's accidental proposal was just the latest complication in her quest for power. Every time they crossed paths, she would give him a cold, calculating smile, as if she were already planning her next move. Garrick knew that things were about to get more complicated. This wasn't just about survival anymore. He was caught in a deadly dance of politics, ambition, and betrayal. And whether he liked it or not, he was the centerpiece of it all. As humanity's most eligible bachelor, he was suddenly the most wanted man in the galaxy. But in a universe filled with dangerous alliances and even deadlier enemies, Garrick quickly realized that being in the spotlight might just be the most dangerous place to be. The days leading up to the wedding were nothing short of a whirlwind for Garrick. What had started as a simple diplomatic mission had turned into a chaotic nightmare. And now, as he reluctantly found himself in the heart of Zarian royal preparations, the pressure was unbearable. It wasn't just the lavish ceremonies or the constant attention from the Zarian court that made his skin crawl. It was the feeling that he was being played like a pawn in a game he didn't understand. Garrick had hoped, at least, that once the wedding was over, he could return to Earth, explain the mishap, and end this diplomatic circus. But Queen Salzira had other plans. She believed that his proposal was fate, and now it had become a symbol of a new era for the Zarians, one where human unpredictability would bring fresh life to the empire. And while Garrick had never intended to be a symbol of anything, he now found himself thrust into the role of a royal consort. The royal palace was a place of constant activity. Guards, servants, and high-ranking officials bustled through the grand hallways, preparing for the event that would unite the two species. Garrick was caught between ceremonial meetings, cultural lessons, and bizarre training sessions designed to prepare him for his new life as the queen's consort. Some of the rituals were harmless, like learning the ancient Zarian dance, while others were downright terrifying. He had to endure tests of endurance and agility, from combat simulations to poison resistance trials. It was all part of the traditional wedding customs. But it wasn't just the customs that were dangerous. Garrick had begun to notice something strange. There were whispers in the palace, rumors of assassination attempts on his life. At first, he thought it was paranoia. After all, not everyone was thrilled about his sudden rise to power. But soon, the threats became too real to ignore. Late one night, as he was leaving the royal dining hall, he felt something. A cold draft, a flicker of movement in the shadows. Before he could react, a figure lunged at him with a dagger. The attacker, a cloaked Zarian assassin, was quick, but Garrick was faster. He had spent enough time in dangerous situations to know how to defend himself, and with a swift move, he disarmed the would-be killer. The assassin, shocked by the human's reflexes, didn't get a chance to react before the guards arrived. But the encounter left Garrick shaken. Who had sent the assassin? And why? As he was escorted to safety by Zirian guards, Garrick's mind raced. This was no longer about a diplomatic misunderstanding or a royal wedding. It was about survival. Someone, within the palace or outside, wanted him dead. And the closer the wedding approached, the more dangerous it became. Zalzira, however, was unfazed. When Garrick reported the attack, she took it in stride, as though it were just another obstacle to overcome. "It is not unusual," she said, her voice calm. "There are always those who resist change. They fear what this union might mean for the Empire, but we will not let them stand in our way." Despite her confidence, Garrick couldn't shake the feeling that Zalzira, for all her power, was not entirely in control of her empire. There were forces within the palace that saw his accidental proposal as a threat, and they weren't afraid to take extreme measures to stop it. He had already seen the cold, calculating gaze of Princess Valthera, Zalzira's younger sister, who seemed to view him as nothing more than a political pawn. Then there was General Scaris, the hard-edged warrior who openly mistrusted him. It was clear that not everyone in the royal family was on his side. As the wedding day drew nearer, Garrick found himself on high alert. He was no longer just an unintentional groom. He was a target. And if he was going to survive this, he would have to rely on more than just luck. He needed to figure out who wanted him dead. And why. The stakes were higher than ever, and Garrick realized that for all the ceremonies, traditions, and royal etiquette, the real battle was about to begin. Garrick had never felt more trapped in his life. The wedding was only days away, and every step he took seemed to lead him deeper into a political maze with no exit. Queen Zalzira had been clear about one thing. This marriage wasn't just a symbolic gesture. It was a bond that would change the very fabric of the Zarian Empire. And for all of his attempts to figure out a way out of this mess, he couldn't deny the power behind her words. The realization hit him like a cold wave during a private conversation with Zalzira late one evening. As they sat in a grand hall adorned with Zirian relics, the queen spoke to him with a solemn tone, her piercing blue eyes focused intently on his. "You must understand, Garrick," she began, her voice steady but heavy with meaning. "This union is not just between you and me. It is a bond that will shape the future of my people. Zirians have always been bound by tradition, by duty, and by strength. But we have forgotten what it means to live freely, to embrace the unpredictable nature of life. That is what humanity brings to us. That is why I accepted your proposal." Garrick felt his stomach tighten. She wasn't just talking about an alliance. She was talking about something far deeper, something that could forever change the balance of power in the galaxy. In Zirian culture, royal marriages were sacred, unbreakable. The vows exchanged weren't just words. They were biologically bound through a process of symbiotic nanites. These nanites would merge with both parties, making them physically and emotionally connected in ways that couldn't be undone. Once the marriage was complete, there was no turning back. It took a moment for Garrick to fully grasp what Zalzira was saying. This wasn't just about an accidental proposal. It was about becoming part of the Zirian royal family in a way that no human had ever been before. The implications were staggering. He was going to become bonded to the queen in a way that was biologically irreversible. There would be no divorce, no escape. As the queen spoke, her words carried a weight that made Garrick's mind spin. She wasn't just offering him a seat at her side. She was offering him a future intertwined with her own. The nanites would allow them to share thoughts, feelings, and even pain. Their fates would be inextricably linked, for better or for worse. The reality of it hit him like a punch in the gut. He had thought the worst thing about this marriage was the political ramifications. But now he understood. The real cost was his freedom. "I know this is a lot to take in," Zalzira continued, her tone softening slightly. But understand this. I don't just need you as a consort. I need you as an equal, someone who can bring new ideas and new ways of thinking to my people. Our empire has grown stagnant, stuck in tradition. Humanity is the spark we need to move forward. That is why you are essential to my vision." Garrick stared at her, torn between the shock of what he had just learned and the growing sense of responsibility that came with it. He had never intended to be anyone's equal, especially not the queen of the Zyrian Empire. But here he was, about to be bound to this powerful, enigmatic ruler in a way that was both terrifying and undeniably intriguing. His mind raced with questions. Could he live with the unbreakable vow? Could he truly become part of something so monumental? And even more pressing, did he have a choice? As much as he wanted to refuse, he knew that walking away from this would be impossible. His fate had already been sealed the moment Salzira had accepted his accidental proposal. In that moment, Garrick realized that his life had been forever altered. There was no going back. The Zyrian Empire was now his future, whether he liked it or not. And whether he was ready for it or not, the marriage to Salzira was about to begin, setting in motion a chain of events that would reshape not just their worlds, but the entire galaxy. As Garrick prepared for the wedding, an unsettling sense of foreboding loomed over him. The grandeur of the event was beyond anything he had ever imagined. Zyrian architecture, with its towering spires and alien technology, created a breathtaking backdrop for what was supposed to be the most important day of his life. Yet the deeper he delved into the preparations, the more he realized that this wasn't just a marriage. It was a political maneuver of epic proportions, and hidden beneath the surface, something far darker was brewing. In the days leading up to the ceremony, Garrick had little time to himself. Every waking moment was filled with lessons, meetings, and rehearsals. He had to learn how to move in Zyrian society, how to sit, speak, and act as a member of the royal family. Yet, despite all the pomp and circumstance, Garrick couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. One evening, as he was walking through the palace gardens, trying to clear his mind, he stumbled upon something that chilled him to the core. It wasn't the lush alien plants that surrounded him, nor the soft hum of Zyrian technology hidden in the landscape. It was the figure in the shadows. A cloaked Zyrian woman, her face obscured, approached him silently. Garrick had been trained to recognize danger, and he instinctively tensed. The woman, however, didn't make a move to harm him. Instead, she handed him a small, encrypted data chip, her movements quick and deliberate. "Take this," the woman whispered, her voice low and urgent. "There are forces within the palace who want to see your marriage to the queen fail. The truth is buried deep, and time is running out. Trust no one." Before he could respond, she vanished into the night, leaving Garrick with nothing but the cryptic message and the small data chip in his hand. He stood there for a moment, his heart racing. Who was she? And what did she mean by forces within the palace? Garrick's mind raced. He had known that not everyone in the palace supported his union with Queen Salzira, but he hadn't anticipated the level of intrigue and danger surrounding it. There were whispers about power struggles within the royal family, and rumors of betrayal that reached the ears of every diplomat in the empire. Princess Valthera, Salzira's sister, had been particularly cold toward him, and General Scaris, the Zyrian warrior who seemed to distrust him from the moment they met, had always looked at him with suspicion. Could one of them be behind the plot to sabotage the marriage, or was there a darker, more powerful force at play? Determined to find out the truth, Garrick secretly activated the data chip in the privacy of his quarters. It revealed a series of encrypted files, detailed blueprints of the palace, records of secret meetings, and most shockingly, information about a hidden faction within the Zyrian government. This faction, it seemed, was planning to overthrow Queen Salzira and install a puppet ruler on the throne. The conspirators believed that her marriage to Garrick, a human, would weaken their empire, and they were willing to do anything to stop it. Garrick felt his blood run cold as he processed the information. The stakes were higher than he had ever imagined. Not only was he at the center of a royal marriage that threatened to change the balance of power, but he was now caught in a deadly conspiracy to take down the queen herself. As the reality of the situation settled in, Garrick realized that his survival depended on more than just keeping up appearances. He had to navigate this treacherous political landscape carefully, making allies where he could, and uncovering the truth behind the conspiracy before it was too late. The clock was ticking, and every move he made could either bring him closer to unraveling the truth or to becoming the next target of those who sought to destroy everything Salzira stood for. The road ahead was dangerous, and Garrick knew that he couldn't trust anyone, not even the queen. The days before the wedding became a blur of tension, uncertainty, and unspoken dangers. Garrick spent most of his time locked in his quarters, poring over the data chip he had received, trying to make sense of the conspiracy that had been hidden beneath the surface of Zirian politics. But the more he dug, the more dangerous the situation became. The factions working against Queen Salzira were powerful, wielding influence in the palace, the military, and even among the nobles. Garrick knew that if he didn't act fast, the consequences could be catastrophic, not just for him, but for the queen and her empire. As the wedding approached, Garrick realized that every day felt like a countdown to an inevitable disaster. There was no turning back now. He had to make a choice: stay loyal to Salzira, the woman who had offered him an unbreakable bond, or betray her trust and expose the conspiracy before it was too late. But even the thought of betraying her sent a wave of guilt through him. He had grown close to the queen in ways he hadn't expected. She wasn't just a political figure or a ruler. She was a woman who truly believed in the future she envisioned for her people. Yet, as much as he admired her vision, Garrick couldn't ignore the reality of what was at stake. The factions trying to sabotage the marriage weren't just against him. They were against everything Salzira stood for. They believed that her vision of a united future with humanity was a threat to their power. To them, Garrick was just a symbol of that change, a symbol they were willing to destroy at any cost. It was in the midst of these swirling thoughts that Garrick found himself face to face with Princess Valthera. He had always sensed her calculating nature, but this time, the tension between them was palpable. She had grown bolder in her approach, no longer hiding her disdain for him. "I know what you've been doing," Valthera said, her voice low and smooth, like the blade of a knife. "You think you can save her, save yourself. But you're wrong. There are forces far greater than you at play here. You have no idea what you're walking into." Garrick stood his ground, though his heart was pounding in his chest. "What are you talking about?" Valthera smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was a smile that sent chills down his spine. "You think the queen's marriage to you will change the empire? You're a fool. Salzira is weak. She's already lost the support of the military, and the council has turned against her. The only reason she's still sitting on the throne is because of her loyalty to you, her human consort. If you want to survive, you'll need to make a choice. Stand with her and die with her, or leave and save yourself." Garrick's blood ran cold. He had suspected that the princess wasn't as innocent as she appeared, but hearing it from her own lips made everything more real. The stakes had just been raised higher than he could have imagined. Valthera wasn't just a rival to Salzira. She was a dangerous enemy, and she wasn't above manipulating Garrick to further her own ambitions. But as Valthera turned to leave, her words echoed in Garrick's mind. "If you want to survive, you'll need to make a choice." Was he truly caught between two sides, loyalty to a queen he had grown to respect, and the undeniable pull of his own survival? Or was there a way out? Could he expose the conspiracy without becoming a pawn in their game? The clock was ticking, and every move Garrick made would either bring him closer to exposing the truth or bury him under the weight of a power struggle he didn't fully understand. As the wedding day loomed ever closer, Garrick knew one thing for certain. The storm that was coming would not be one he could escape from easily. The true battle for the future of the Zarian Empire had only just begun. The day of the wedding finally arrived, but for Garrick, it felt like the calm before a storm. His heart raced as he stood in the opulent royal hall, surrounded by Zarian nobles, generals, and foreign diplomats. The magnificent structure, with its alien architecture and shimmering lights, felt like a gilded cage. He could feel the eyes of the court on him, watching every move, every gesture. And yet, he couldn't shake the overwhelming sense of dread that gnawed at him. Today wasn't just a ceremony. It was a turning point for both the Zarian Empire and humanity, and the forces conspiring against it were closing in fast. Garrick glanced over at Queen Salzira, who stood by his side. Her regal beauty, sharp intelligence, and the sheer force of her presence filled the room. Yet, despite her poised appearance, Garrick saw the slightest trace of unease in her eyes. She knew, just like he did, that this marriage wasn't the only thing hanging in the balance. The fate of her entire empire rested on their union, and on the secrets buried within the palace walls. As the ceremony progressed, Garrick couldn't help but notice the tension in the air. Zarian courtiers exchanged nervous glances, while others seemed to watch him with barely concealed hostility. He could feel it, the growing pressure. Someone, or something, was about to make a move. The conspirators had been watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. But the question was, would they do it before the vows were exchanged, or had they already made their move and set everything in motion? It wasn't until the final vows were being recited that Garrick's worst fear came to life. As Salzira reached out to take his hand, a sudden explosion rocked the palace, shaking the entire building to its core. The crowd screamed in panic as smoke filled the hall and chaos erupted. Garrick instinctively pulled Salzira close, shielding her from the panic around them. His heart pounded in his chest. This wasn't just an attack. It was the beginning of the end. Through the cloud of dust and debris, Garrick saw figures moving in the shadows, figures he recognized. General Scaris and his loyal soldiers, armed and ready, had infiltrated the palace. The military leader's icy stare met Garrick's as he raised his weapon, signaling the beginning of the coup. The princess's words echoed in his mind. "If you want to survive, you'll need to make a choice." Garrick's mind raced. He had known the rebellion was coming, but seeing it unfold in front of him was something else entirely. The general's forces had already begun securing parts of the palace, and there was no time to waste. Salzira needed to get out, fast. He couldn't risk her falling into the hands of those who would use her for their own gain. "We need to move," Garrick said urgently, gripping Salzira's arm. "We can't stay here. They're here for you." Salzira's expression hardened, her royal poise returning in an instant. "I know, but we have one chance to stop them." Garrick could hardly believe what he was hearing. In the midst of a palace-wide coup, Salzira was ready to fight, to take back control. But they were outnumbered, and with the royal guards already turning on them, escaping was their only option. They made their way through hidden corridors, guided only by the dim glow of emergency lights, as the sound of chaos echoed behind them. Garrick's heart pounded as he realized how deep the conspiracy ran. The princess, General Scaris, and the nobles who had turned against the queen. They were all in this together. Garrick had no illusions now. This wasn't just a battle for power. It was a fight for survival. And the stakes were higher than ever. As he looked at Salzira, her eyes fierce with determination, he knew one thing for certain. The only way to stop this rebellion was to expose the truth before it was too late. The fate of the entire empire hung in the balance, and the clock was ticking. The halls of the palace were in chaos. Garrick could hear the distant sounds of fighting, blaster fire and shouts echoing through the corridors. He had never imagined that his accidental proposal would lead to a full-scale coup, but now, with every step he took alongside Queen Salzira, the reality of their situation hit him like a punch to the gut. They were on the run, trapped in their own palace, hunted by the very people who had once sworn loyalty to her. The rebellion led by General Scaris and Princess Valthera had spread like wildfire, and it seemed that there was nowhere left to hide. But Salzira was resolute, her eyes flashing with determination as they navigated the labyrinthine hallways. Despite the danger, her every movement spoke of her strength and her resolve. "We need to get to the control room," she said, her voice steady, though Garrick could sense the tension in her tone. The control room was the heart of the palace's security systems. If they could get there, they could lock down the palace and prevent the coup from spreading further. Garrick nodded, his hand still firmly gripping hers as they hurried down the darkened hallway. "I'll protect you, Salzira. You don't have to do this alone." His voice was filled with urgency. He knew that time was running out. Every minute they wasted brought the rebellion closer to victory. They reached the control room entrance, only to find it barricaded. Two of General Scaris's soldiers were stationed outside, their weapons raised, ready to strike. Garrick's heart raced. They had no time for a standoff. He needed to act fast, or they would be trapped with no escape. He turned to Salzira. "Stay behind me," he said quickly. "I'll handle this." Salzira nodded, but her grip tightened on his arm. She wasn't afraid of a fight. In fact, she looked more determined than ever. But Garrick knew she couldn't afford to get injured, not now. He needed her to be strong, for both of them. With a deep breath, Garrick stepped forward, his mind focused on the task ahead. He charged at the two soldiers, moving with speed and precision. The first soldier barely had time to react before Garrick took him down, using a well-placed strike to his shoulder. The second soldier attempted to draw his weapon, but Garrick was faster. He grabbed the soldier's arm, twisting it to disarm him before knocking him out with a quick punch to the chest. The door to the control room slid open, revealing a dimly lit interior. Garrick and Salzira rushed inside, only to find it occupied by a single figure, Princess Valthera, standing before the control panel, her face a mask of anger and defiance. "You've come too late," Valthera sneered, her eyes cold. "It's over, Salzira. You were never fit to rule. I will restore the empire to its true power." Salzira stood tall, unshaken by her sister's words. "You've betrayed everything this empire stands for, Valthera." Her voice was fierce, but there was a sadness in it, as if she had hoped for a different outcome. "The people deserve more than your thirst for power." The two women faced each other, the weight of their words heavy in the air. Garrick could feel the tension building, the electric charge of imminent confrontation. He knew that this wasn't just about the throne. It was about everything Salzira had fought for, everything she had worked to change. Valthera was determined to stop her at any cost. "I won't let you destroy everything I've worked for," Salzira said, her voice cold and filled with conviction. Garrick's hand rested on his blaster, ready to act if needed. But he knew there was more to this battle than firepower. It was a battle for the soul of the Zyrian Empire. In a split second, the room erupted. Princess Valthera lunged forward, but Salzira was faster. With a swift, decisive movement, she activated the control panel, locking down the palace's security systems. The palace doors slammed shut, and the soldiers outside were trapped. The rebellion was over. As the dust settled, Valthera, defeated and out of breath, was taken into custody. The battle had been won, but the war for the future of the Zyrian Empire had only just begun. Garrick turned to Salzira, his heart pounding in his chest. "We did it," he said, his voice filled with relief. Salzira nodded, her expression softening for the first time in days. "Yes, but the real work is only beginning. We'll rebuild this empire together, Garrick. We will change the course of history." As they stood together, the future of the empire lay before them, uncertain, yet full of promise. The journey that had begun with an accidental proposal had led them to this moment. And together, they would face whatever challenges came next.